Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your consistency and your subscribership, subscriberhood, whatever you call it. But more importantly, I appreciate our connection because a lot of you do reach out, whether it's in comments or on my Facebook and direct message, and follow up with a lot of videos I post. Also, inquiries about potentially relocating here, vacationing here in Costa Rica. So I am more than happy to spend time in conversations sharing the beauty of this paradise with everyone. So please, if you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, and also feel free to reach out to me on Tobnosuski on Facebook. I'm very interactive on there as well, and I provide a lot of content that you're not going to see on the YouTube channels simply because this is video content and I can post a plethora of other things over there, whether it's text writing, whether it's photos, whether it's sharing things from other pages that I find valuable. That's much easier to do on Facebook. So if you haven't yet liked the Tobnosuski page on Facebook, please go over there and do so. But getting on to the point of today's vlog and post and story, I should say, is continuing the characters of Costa Rica. And now the first couple, it might have seemed like I was dwelling on some negative scenarios that I had, or not so wonderful scenarios, but it's because I wanted to provide an alternative perspective. A lot of the things you see on YouTube are glorified and they're all kind of lovey-dovey and great experiences about the country without people who've lived here for a while being truly objective as far as this is what's happened. It's not a subjective choice of this is the best thing that happens. This is just something that happened, and that's what I really want to provide as far as the difference in my YouTube channel. I'm not trying to get people to relocate. I'm not trying to get people to see the worst in a place, but I'm trying to provide both of the options. It's not all birds chirping. There's motorcycles driving by sometimes. There's trucks that slam on their air brakes at 11 o'clock at night. Thankfully not so much in my neighborhood, but on the highway. If you're anywhere near Jaco or Playa Hermosa or Uvita or Dominical, you're going to hear these things. So I really focus on personalities rather than kind of unchangeable things in the country or in any country in the world. There's certain things that you cannot change unless you are a politician, unless you are the CEO of some of these big companies and you enact different policies. So I am and have always been a pursuer, a student of consciousness, and not only to understand human consciousness, but also to find tweaks and hacks and ways, just like a fitness expert does, or just like a psychologist does, as far as how we can improve our reality. Now, consciousness is very different from both fitness and psychology in the sense that it is the nature of who we are, and it is also a derivation of our fitness, of our psychology, and our interaction with other people sociologically. So consciousness can be shifted much more easy in terms of empathy and compassion and listening to stories of other people than it can to transform your body or delve yourself or transform traumas into progress in a life. These are processes that take some time, where an adjustment in consciousness can happen immediately. In the Hindu culture, in the Siddha Yoga culture specifically, they call it Shaktipat, where an ascended guru, someone who has obtained much more, developed consciousness than the average person, can literally walk up to the average person, tap them in what would be known as the third eye, or over the pineal gland, and actually transmit their consciousness into that person, so that person can then resonate at the same level as someone who's done a lot of work. That said, that is kind of the intent of these videos, is not to share stories and make people feel bad. That's why I don't include any names. I'm not targeting anybody. I'm just providing archetypes of certain personalities so that anybody that's potentially going to live here, more specifically than visit, but also visitors, tourists, can have an idea of what type of people to expect, so there's not a shock factor, and that their consciousness is more adapted to this environment and this specific type of place on the planet, which is influenced by a lot of psychological factors, sociological factors over hundreds, if not thousands of years. That is very different from North America and different from European mindset and development. So that said, today I'm not necessarily focusing on like a bad experience I had in trying to almost warn my subscribers and viewers or anybody that stumbles across this that, hey, listeners, these personalities, they can kind of take advantage of you if you're not keen to what's going on. No, this is more something that I've had to entertain my entire life, because I would always wander into forests in North Jersey and hear jungles in Costa Rica on my own, sometimes with a machete, but most of the time without any personal protection weaponry or anything, because I don't feel I need it. But sometimes you do need it. And this is a situation where anybody that visits Costa Rica has to be acutely aware of the dynamic ecosystem and ecological expression here. There are more species of any animal, bird, plant here in Costa Rica than there are anywhere on the planet. It's the most biodiverse place on planet Earth, including the Amazon jungle. We are in a much smaller, concentrated area, and we have much more biodiversity. So there's less space for some of these larger animals, ourselves included, to be competing for space with. And sometimes it is a competition. If you haven't visited Costa Rica, something you should be very aware of is that there are crocodiles and alligators and caimans all over the country. Specifically where I live in Parita, and my house in Vasconia is 1 kilometer from a giant river that runs from the mountains all the way down to the ocean in Palo Seco and unleashes or unravels itself essentially in a giant extension of a combination of rivers that then goes and wraps itself around Palo Seco and leads into the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. So there are at times, often, not just in Tarcoles River just north of Jaco, but here as well we have crocodiles and alligators. And in Manuel Antonio National Park, and then you get down towards Osa Peninsula, I mean, you have all types of large reptiles that are carnivorous. You need to be aware of these things, because if you're swimming in a river, or you're swimming in a lake, or an estuary of any sort, or the ocean, by the mouth of these rivers, there is a high likelihood that there is going to be a large carnivorous reptilian predator there. Call it a dinosaur, call it a crocodile, call it whatever you want, but they are potentially man-eaters, and you have to be aware of them. And you don't hear, thankfully, too much about tourists getting attacked, but mostly it's guys that are living up in the mountains that maybe had one too many drinks and want to go for a swim at dusk, and that's the beginning of feeding time for a lot of these animals. They're nocturnal for the most part, although they are out in the daytime as well. So you have to be aware. I've heard and seen videos of multiple people getting eaten by crocodiles in my neighborhood, not too far from here. Most recently, there was a guy that after a soccer game had jumped off a bridge, and his teammates filmed his body being dragged around lifeless by a crocodile or alligator. So it happens. Also, the undertow and current, like these are things that not many people are aware of. I just met, just to give a little anecdote, a gentleman from England who wanted to retire here, and I met him at a little soda in Parita, and we just struck into a conversation, and he explained to me that he and a group of like 20 people walked from, I'm going to mispronounce this, Turrialba, which is like the farmland in the center of the country, and they actually took a long walk, like a 17-day walk, all the way down the mountains here to the beach, the Pacific coast, right in Parita, and they were camping out on the beach. And I had to tell him, I said, oh, just be careful swimming. He goes, why? And I told him, little chance of crocodiles, but a greater chance that the current, the undertow, is going to carry you out. And a lot of people that aren't used to this or aren't strong swimmers actually drown in Palo Seco Beach. It happens, annually, because there's no lifeguards. The current is killer. And it's a really deep shelf into the ocean. The beach itself is like 15 kilometers long. So it's almost like a sea vacuum that pulls people in. And, currents run like this. This is your little lesson, right? So if it's pulling you out into the ocean, you're never going to be able to swim strong enough to swim back against it. You're only going to exhaust yourself and then get dragged further. But they only last a couple hundred meters. So if you either swim sideways, you'll break out of it, and at some point you'll get the current bringing you back into the shore. Or if it takes you all the way out, at some point it's going to loop back around, and it's going to be strong enough, it's going to pull you in. So you just got to patiently tread water, conserve your energy, and hope that you don't run into any other large predators out there. But most of the time, it's the current and the water, the ocean that swallows people. But anyway, I'm not talking about oceanic or marine deaths right now. I'm going to be talking about what you might stumble into in the jungle filled with more big cat species than any place on Earth. For example, starting at the top, we have jaguars and black panthers. We have pumas or mountain lions. We then have a slew of smaller yet still dangerous animals like the jaguarundi, the ocelot, the tyra, there's half a dozen, if not a dozen of them out there. There's also coyotes, and coyotes hunt in packs. If you're alone in the woods, you are food just like a deer would be food, just like a dog would be food, just like a baby cow or a horse would be food. So you have to be aware. Now, thankfully, knock on wood, although we do have pumas and jaguars and rumored black panthers that have been seen in the area where I live and through my little quebrada, the little stream that runs through my property, I've seen cat paws, feline paws about this big. I don't know if you can see how big that is, but I have fairly large hands. Let's just say the palm of my hand. So something's back here, probably something that could take out my dogs if it wanted to. Maybe it could give me a couple nice bites and scars, but I don't think it would kill me. A jaguar, on the other hand, are known for hunting caimans and crocodiles. If something can kill a crocodile with one bite to the neck, what do you think it could do to a human? Well, I'm going to show you in some photos at the end of this video, so stay tuned. These photos were sent to me by a friend who received them from another friend. There's like an internal Costa Rican WhatsApp network, whether it's for who's growing what food in the neighborhood so they can spread it around or sell it for that matter, happenings that are going on in school, gossip groups. There's another one which I'll speak about in another video where there's kind of WhatsApp groups of any, let's say, porn stars, OnlyFans girls, and sometimes celebrities visiting Costa Rica, and they kind of get circulated around, and that's a funny thing. I'll touch it in another video because that's a different type of predator that we're talking about. But this video is about jaguar attacks in Costa Rica and survivors, better yet, of jaguar attacks. Now, anybody that doesn't know my story, I've been in a serious car accident when I was 18 years old that left me with a 14-inch laceration. I was scalped. My ear was off. I had a hole in my face. I almost lost my eye and numerous other things. But the most impactful thing, residual, is this big long scar I have. And a lot of people in Costa Rica don't necessarily relate it to a car accident because they've seen other people with these scars that it's come from a jaguar attack that they've survived. And a few people have asked me if I was attacked by a jaguar, and it's very interesting because my friends and I have conversations about reincarnation often. And one of my friends said something that no one else in my life before living in Costa Rica has ever said, that when we were talking about some of our past lives and some memories that we've retained, he said to me right away, he goes, so your accident, you were reliving many of your deaths from past lifetimes. And I've only ever felt that to myself. I've never shared it with other people because in the United States, reincarnation is not as common a conversation. So he said that to me, and I said, that's really weird how you just said that to me. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I've seen a bunch of results of jaguar attacks, and your scar looks like you were attacked by a jaguar and survived it. And after seeing, and you'll see footage of one of this, not footage necessarily, but after photos of a guy that down in Osa Peninsula, which is, huge preserved ecological system. I think that's the most concentrated ecology, biodiverse center on planet Earth, the Osa Peninsula. So if you're ever in Costa Rica, visit it. Be very cautious and be with a guide and make sure they know what they're doing and you're with a team of people. But anyway, um, these are people that you're going to see, and I've seen a guy in Parita quite often who's on the bus. He's got a young family, but he has similar scars to me on the same side of the head, and I've always wanted to ask him, kind of like a brother in camaraderie of heavily traumatized skulls, what happened to him. But my assumption is he was attacked by some type of big cat, whether it was a puma or a jaguar, and it could have been like a farming accident, but I would say it's unlikely because when something big and metal crushes you and stuff, it doesn't usually just leave superficial scars. Typically, although that's what happened to me, a car landing on my head 10 times. I was a rare survivor of that situation, where most people that are in incidents like that, just to give you a reference, the guy that I was speaking to that did this big walk to the beach was a firefighter, and he commented on my scar too and asked what happened. And he said, I can't tell you how many accidents I've come across less than yours, and people were dead or decapitated and things like that. And I just explained I got very lucky. If we go into the spiritual side of it, it felt like two beings were hugging me as the car was flipping. That seemed to protect me from being decapitated and from being completely dismembered and just crushed to death. So that's another story altogether. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say, but other than you might see people with some abnormal scars in Costa Rica, and if you so happen to get in conversations with them and they are open to sharing, you may learn that these people were attacked by jaguars, which is basically like being attacked by a lion or a tiger. They are in the same echelon of big cat and alpha predator. Now, visualize that for a moment. Imagine walking through the forest on a hike. You're going to a waterfall, just having fun. You got a little walking stick, maybe a machete if you're lucky, and there's no one else around, even if there are friends around. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this thing that has been stalking you jumps on you, several hundreds of pounds, definitely weighing more than you, maybe twice to 3 times your weight, and definitely 5 times your strength, grabs you by the neck or head with teeth that are this big, right in your head, and it just starts thrashing and tearing. What do you do? What would your instincts be? These are some things you have to think about, because if you don't fight for survival, you will not survive. That's the same thing with crocodiles. If you don't fight for your survival, you will not survive, and you're just going to be another statistic, another story that Costa Rica is not necessarily going to share with the rest of the world, because it's going to prevent people from coming here. But it's a real thing that happens, so I wanted to give you guys not just a warning about it, but just some acute awareness that this is a thing. I've been here 3.5 years. I've experienced several of these photos being sent to me on my WhatsApp, which make my stomach turn, but they're also going to make your stomach turn. So I want to give you a warning, a shock factor warning, that if you've made it to this point in the video, in another minute or so, I'm going to add these photos to the video, and you're going to see them. So I just want you to be aware. I also want you to know that there's a photo of the jaguar, because somebody else was around that helped this guy survive, and they actually killed the jaguar. Because it was essentially a man-eater, so that's a problem. I'm not saying it was right or legit, but listen, if you see your friend getting attacked by a jaguar, your instinct is going to be to try to get it away, and knowing that when you try to get it away, it might try to turn and kill you too, out of defense or out of aggression or whatever's going on, right? Maybe it was sick too. You never know. But they killed this jaguar, and I'm going to include that photo too. Not because I glorify the killing of animals, but this is just the situation. It wasn't my situation. I didn't do anything. I'm just sharing what was sent to me. So if you're in Costa Rica, don't be in the jungle alone. This is my warning. Be with a guide. Be with somebody that at least has a machete and knows what they're doing. Don't think, oh, I can hike just like I'm going hiking in my forest back home. No, because even then you got to be aware. In North Jersey, when I lived up there, there was people that occasionally very rarely would get attacked by black bears, and one guy was eaten at one point because he just didn't know how to act and his friends ran away from him. So the key is stay in numbers anywhere you are. You just got to stay with a group, and you guys will be protected because you're bigger than an individual. An individual is, food, and you got to remember that an individual is food here, one way or another. But right now we're talking about wildlife, and if you're alone, there's a higher likelihood that you might become prey to a larger predator that does exist here. So I just wanted to warn everybody, this is a different type of character in Costa Rica. I encourage you, if you see somebody with a scar like that, ask them what happened. Say, I'm thinking of moving here, and I'm just curious, how did you acquire this scar? Is there something that I should be aware of? And you might get a first-hand tale of something truly, truly extraordinary, and a good lesson to live by. Thank you guys for tuning in. Like, subscribe, share with anybody that might be visiting Costa Rica that's a little more adventurous and you think might be wandering through the jungles alone. I highly recommend sharing this video with them so they at least become alert and aware of some of the potential dangers of being in the most beautiful place on earth ecologically.